When you first open VS Code, you'll be met with this screen. Now, because we're new to VS Code and we don't need to set up syncing just yet, we're going to skip this step and move to choosing the look that we want. I personally prefer dark modern as the bright colors hurt my eyes. Now you can continue through VS Code's tutorial or follow this video instead. Before we get started, please make sure to download the attached file for this video. Once you've downloaded it, let's head back to Visual Studio Code and learn how to use it. Let's start by opening up the folder that holds the file we just downloaded. To open the folder, we can either press the Open button here in the middle of the screen, or we can head over to the File tab on the left of VS Code and press Open Folder. I would recommend keeping your course files organized under this folder. When this pop-up appears, you can select Yes, I trust the authors. Now, when the File tab on the left is selected, you'll be able to see all the files within the folder that we just selected over here on the left-hand side. Let's select the file that we just downloaded, and in here you'll find the code written inside the file. Now, Visual Studio Code automatically recognized that this is a Python file, and you can see that in the bottom right over here, Visual Studio Code is giving us a notification, and it's asking us if we want to install the recommended Python extension for the Python language. Despite installing Python on our computer, VS Code still needs to be able to understand how to work with Python. So we're going to go ahead and press Install. Pressing Install took us to the Extensions tab. You can find it in the bottom left of the tabs in VS Code's left menu. This tab allows us to download extensions for VS Code, which are kind of like plugins to VS Code, such as different programming languages, or tools like Prettier that help us code by keeping our code more organized. To install an extension, we simply need to press the Install button, and it does everything by itself. We know it was successfully installed and enabled when the Install button changes to Disable and Uninstall. We can also read more about the extension down here. Once our Python extension has finished downloading and installing, let's go back to our file. To run our code, we can simply press the play button in the top right of Visual Studio. The output from the code should be displayed down here. In this bottom window, we have a couple of tabs. Let's start with the Problems tab. When we have a problem in our code, it's going to appear here, and it will also tell us where the problem is in our code. You can also click on the problem you want to fix, and VS Code will take you to it. The next tab is the Output tab. The Output tab in Visual Studio Code is a panel that displays messages from various features in the integrated development environment. It's used to display status messages for various features in the IDE, such as debugging information, errors, and warnings. In the next tab, we have something called Debugging Console. Debugging is the process of going through our code line by line to examine its behavior and find problems within it. We'll have a whole lesson on this later. For now, just ignore it. In the next tab, we have the terminal, where you can find the output from our code. Normally, after running our code, we should see which user ran the file, the name of our computer, from which folder we ran our command, the program that was used to run the file, and the name of the file that was run, along with its full path. Essentially, where it's located on our computer. And finally, we can see the output from our code. The final tab is the Ports tab, which isn't really relevant to us or to this course, so I'm just going to skip it. One last thing I'd like to mention regarding the Terminal tab. This is essentially your computer's command line or terminal for Mac users. You can run commands straight from here on your computer, instead of opening a separate terminal window. Let's move on to the left menu. We've already covered the File Explorer, so we're simply going to skip to the Search item. We can use it to search for file names or keywords within all of the files inside the folder that's currently open in VS Code. We can also open the results straight into our editor by clicking Open in Editor over here. As you can see, the results were opened in a separate tab, because Visual Studio Code actually works with tabs, so we can have multiple files open at the same time. We can also use the split window button in the top right in order to see multiple files side by side. In addition to the search tab, we can also use Control P for Windows or Command P on Mac to open VS Code's shortcut search bar. Here you can search for files, macros, and more. It's a very useful tool and I highly recommend you familiarize yourself with it. Going back to the left menu, the next tab that we have is our version control, where we'll see changes made to our files since they were last synced with our repository. I know this doesn't make a lot of sense to you just yet, and we'll have a whole chapter dedicated to this towards the end of our course. So for now, we're just going to move on. The next tab we have is the debugging view. Here, we'll be able to see our variables when we debug our programs. But as I mentioned earlier, we'll have a whole lesson dedicated to debugging. Next, we have the Extensions tab, which we've already reviewed. Any other tabs that you may have are related to extensions that are installed on your computer and don't come with a basic installation of VS Code. So let's get to it and start learning how to program in Python.